Both nations have in fact met as well. The External Affairs Minister S. Shankar met his Russian counterpart in Moscow just a week ago to discuss what Geeta was really referring to at this point in time, the entire gamut of the relationship between both the nations. I'm also going to bring in this conversation Ksenia Kondratieva, who is in fact a well-known journalist from Russian TV, and she joins us from Moscow at this point in time. Thank you so much for connecting. I'd like to get in your views and your perspective on what has been said, at least for the time being, by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the ties between Russia and India. He's spoken about how both countries have been in continuous conversation. He's spoken also about how both countries have stood by each other in difficult times, is what our Prime Minister said. Also spoke about the need for peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Right. Thanks for having me. We are closely watching for these meetings both yesterday and today here in Moscow, because, of course, India is an important partner, has been always an important partner, not only at times when Russia is at odds with the West, but even before. And it's important for many things. It's not just strong ties, decades old and tested. This is actually very important because this explains Prime Minister Modi's words, and Mr. Putin also noted the same in his remarks, that these ties have been tested, the partnership has been tested. Why? Because actually, if you look at the relationship between the two countries over 7 decades, right, there has been no instance where the countries had some real concerns between each other, some kind of actions that can be considered as betrayal. Both countries have not been lecturing each other on how to deal with other countries, with third parties, whom to trade with, whom to have political conversation with. That has never been the case between Russia and India, and I think that is very well respected by by leaders, by diplomats, by policymakers, by experts. This is something that has been very unique, actually, about Russia-India relationship.
It's a very interesting point that you make, and I'd like to bring in Gaurav on that. Gaurav, I recall, there was so much pressure on India to condemn, first the tensions and then the conflict when it did start between Russia and Ukraine. Domestic pressure as well from the opposition back home in the country, this playing out as India being silent to, so-called atrocities, and also on Russia and Ukraine war. India in that sense has stood its ground, isn't it? And always, like Geeta also mentioned a few moments ago, as that it was one of the first few countries to, in fact, say that peace is the only way forward without really interfering between both the nations, isn't it? And that is something what is being said is respected widely in Russia as well. Gaurav. Coming back to you, in fact, in a moment from now, I'm just going to come back to you. Just like to tell our viewers, this bilateral has now ended. The bilateral between Russia and India, between the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Vladimir Putin, has just ended. To tell our viewers that it went on, in fact, for 40 minutes or so. During this bilateral meeting, this is what we are learning. With the Prime Minister, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has said, "I'm feeling very happy after meeting you, as CEO provides a platform to unite the countries of the global South and East." December 21, 2025 marks the 15th anniversary of the elevation of India-Russia ties to a special and privileged strategic partnership. We enjoy a multi-faceted relationship. Today's meeting is expected to provide a significant boost to the India-Russian relationship. For more on that, I'm going to go straight across, in fact, to Gaurav. Gaurav, later in the year, a visit from the Russian president is also something that India is going to be looking at closely. What else are you picking up as far as the bilateral here? It went on for 40 minutes is concerned.
So Prime Minister Narendra Modi is believed to have renewed that invitation to the Russian president to visit India in December 2025 for that annual bilateral summit. They did review their bilateral ties and various other fields in which India and Russia are moving forward. But that principal point that India made, the request that had come in from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for peace between Russia and Ukraine, the Prime Minister in fact initiated that conversation, flanked by Ajit Doval, India's National Security Advisor, and Vikram Misri, India's Foreign Secretary on either side. The Prime Minister's point very emphatically was the quest for peace, because that would benefit the entire humankind. Unfortunately, lakhs of lives have been lost and people have been injured in the Russia-Ukraine war that started in February 2022. It would have ended in a week, sadly, in a week when that Turkey moderated ceasefire was to take effect. When the dialogue was happening, Ukraine backed off, according to Russia, under British pressure, and Boris Johnson subsequently even visited Ukraine. And Europe and America stand accused of, they kept fueling that war for 3 years plus and counting, and lakhs of lives have been lost and injured on either side, and the war still continues. So India's effort has been talk to each other, find common ground, and have peace in the interest of humankind so that bloodshed can be stopped. Prime Minister visited Russia, Prime Minister has visited Ukraine. He's offered all assistance, but then left the decision entirely to the two principals, making it very clear there cannot be peace until both the principals are at the talks table simultaneously. So anyone that plays a third-party role between Russia and Ukraine, they have to ensure both Russia and Ukraine are on the same table.
I'm going to bring in Senior as well in this conversation. Senior, your response to what has been said by Russia as far as the multifaceted relationship between both the nations concerned. Geeta touched upon it as well a few moments ago, talking about this whole gamut of the relationship that both countries have: economic, trade, historical, cultural. And this is something that is reflected in this bilateral as well, as far as the takeaways here and the deliverables here from this bilateral is concerned, isn't it?
See, of course, you have to see the backdrop of this particular meeting because in the past few weeks, actually Washington, which considers New Delhi as its partner, as its important strategic partner, has moved completely, against India, imposing the tariffs, threatening to impose more, saying that it's over its energy trade and defense trade with Russia. But I think the view from Moscow and the view which we read and hear from India as well, that it's not much because of India's relationship with Russia. It's rather an instrument to, coerce India into, whatever trade pact and other relationship that are favorable to the U.S., which is again, we go back to today's statements by Russian and Indian leaders, coercing someone and threatening someone to get better deals is not the way. If you see, I've been covering Russia-India relationship for past 15 years, and for the past decade, the relationship has always been good and steady and nice because there is a lot of warmness. It's not just transactional like it happens with other countries probably, but the ties have not, the economic ties have not been growing that fast. Of course, Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, helped India's economy right after independence. It had a lot of influence. It helped building factories, steel factories. Then there was relationship in oil refining and so on. But what we see in the past 3 years is a totally different dynamics. And it's not just the oil trade. It's not just defense trade, which are considered the common pillars. It's something more than that. It's a lot of cooperation in technology, in education. It's not something that the countries necessarily publicly talk about. Again, because of sanctions, because they want to keep it to themselves. But we can clearly see the change. And why it is happening? Because both Russia and India know that they can trust each other. They will not go into all this tariff policy or, let's say, unexpected voting in the UN or things like this. They have this trust at all at all possible levels. It doesn't mean that they are completely agree on everything. And again, Prime Minister Modi has been saying since 2022, since their meeting in Uzbekistan, right, that this is not the era of war. But by saying that, he's probably translating the feeling in the entire global south, which has been affected by the conflict, not by the conflict per se, but by the geopolitical changes, by the enormous sanctions that were imposed on Russia, which has broken the entire supply chains across the world. This has affected the globe. But he never told Mr. Putin, okay, do these and that, because he knows that Russia and Ukraine will decide how to basically end this conflict. I remember India was asked many times, and Mr. Jaishankar was asked many times whether India will act as sort of a mediator. And what India said that if such requests come, India is open to, but it has never proactively, unlike US President Donald Trump probably, said that it wants to be a peacemaker. India just says that we need peace, and everyone says that yes, we need peace.
Right. But
how to
the big
achieve
question is that have we done enough to carry a signal, isn't it, Senior? I'm going to also bring in Geeta in this conversation. Geeta Mohan and Gaurav continue to be with us. Okay, going back to, in fact, Geeta in a moment from now, Gaurav also, in fact, Xenia continues to be with us. Gaurav, India has never really actively, in that sense, played the role of a mediator, isn't it? India did not travel to Alaska. It was Donald Trump trying to broker that peace. In fact, as far as the meeting in Alaska was concerned, but has that signal been carried to Putin, given the call that was made from the Ukrainian president to India, to Prime Minister Modi, yesterday, as far as this meeting is concerned between, in fact, Russia and India today? Has that signal been carried, Gaurav?
So historically, India and Russia have been very close, but do keep in mind, when the Soviet Union split and Ukraine became an independent country, India was the first country to recognize even Ukraine. So India's ties with Ukraine have been historic and equally significant. Point one. Point two, it was Ukraine that chose to sell military hardware to Pakistan. For example, when India was buying the T-72 tanks from Russia, the T-80 UD tanks were provided by Ukraine to Russia. At the same to Pakistan. At the same time, India did not stop buying either the AN-32 medium lift transport aircraft, which was the lifeline of the Indian Air Force in the Siachen Glacier, because these are short takeoff aircraft, very, very powerful engines, Antonovs that are manufactured in Ukraine. In fact, Kiev was the factory which was destroyed in Russian bombing subsequently. So India continued taking not just the Antonov aircraft, AN-32s after AN-12s initially in the 1950s and 60s, but also ship engines were coming from there. A lot of other equipment was coming from there, military equipment, and Indian medical students were studying in Ukraine. So India was equalizing its relation both with Russia and Ukraine, much closer to Russia. However, when this war happened, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was invited both by Russia and by Ukraine. He went to both the countries, delivered each other's message, but the point was sit with each other and find a solution.
I want to bring in fact, Shu Jinshen, a CGTN reporter, joining us live from Tianjin. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Apologies if I'm not, do correct me. I want to, in fact, just ask you, and do put this into perspective. There's been a fair amount of conversation when it comes to China's active role in terms of the kind of support that is always lended to its all-weather partner, Pakistan. Today, India has condemned, SCO has condemned the Pahalgam terror attacks here in Jammu and Kashmir in India. The big question is, how far is China going to really walk the talk when it comes to, in fact, in a way, showing the mirror to Pakistan and also standing by India, given how continuously India has always been a victim of terror? Your take on what has been communicated by the SCO today?
So first of all, we have to mention that, send condolence to those who are affected and that incurred during those terrorist attacks or whatnot. And the Tianjin Declaration has been issued by the world leaders during this morning's meeting that condemn terrorist attacks. And if we're talking about Shanghai Cooperation Organization for its 24 years of existence, that security issue has been a top priority, counter-terrorism, if we're calling it. And the SCO has been providing a platform I would consider. If we're talking about India and Pakistan, both countries joined the SCO the same year in 2017. And that means the two sides are actually talking with each other. And of course, that from that Tianjin Declaration, the SCO's regional anti-terrorist structure has been praised by those world leaders to really tackle terrorist attacks. And if we look back in history in 2024, competent authorities of SCO member states have prevented 43 terrorist activities and stopped over 13,000 crimes related to terrorism, separatism, and extremism. More than 2,000 leaders and members of international terrorist organizations were detained. And we could definitely see there's greater results from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the organization is promoting mechanism improvement in security cooperation. And if we recall earlier today, Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the organization should push forward to establish this universal center for security threats. And if we're coming back to the Shanghai spirit of this organization, mutual trust and mutual benefit.
In fact, I'm just going to ask you to continue to be with us, because this is a conversation that will continue in just a bit from now, asking all of you to continue to be with us. We get you all the details as far as the SCO summit is concerned, India's role at the SCO summit is concerned, the important bilateral with China and with Russia is something that we are breaking down for our viewers.